But then suddenly with COVID, we found things, and not exactly our next door neighbors, but within the surrounding community, for example, in Nova Scotia, they closed the beaches
Yeah.
because, it's COVID, and so you can't go to the beach. Nova Scotia is beach. There's beach everywhere.
The license plate here says Canada's Ocean Playground.
Yeah, but you weren't allowed to go to the beach.
No.
And people were reporting each other.
Yeah.
If you took your dog down to the beach where there was nobody else, I mean, even on a good day in the middle of tourist season in Nova Scotia, the beaches are not crowded. There are so many beaches and so few people. You can shoot a cannon down these beaches and not hit anything. There was nobody else anywhere to be seen. This wasn't us. I just had heard about it in the community. Someone took their dog for a walk down the beach and they got reported to the authorities because you weren't supposed to. Hello there. Welcome to Collapse Life. I'm Zahra Sethna, the host of this thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. I just had the pleasure of being a guest on another liberty-minded podcast, The Freedom Conversation. David Gardner and I talked about what motivates our respective programs and shared stories about the similar journeys we're on. So similar, in fact, that he lives just down the road from where my husband and I used to live on the South Shore of Nova Scotia. David and his wife considered leaving, like we did, but they decided to stay, and we talked about the pros and cons of that decision too. I hope you enjoy the chat, and if you do, please like and subscribe, not just to this channel, but also to the Freedom Conversation. Independent bloggers and podcasters like us need all the support we can get, and we're grateful for every like, share, and comment we receive. And with that out of the way, let's get to the conversation.
Welcome to the Freedom Conversation podcast. Zahra Sethna is host of Collapse Life, a podcast and Substack I have recently discovered. Collapse Life is about a year old now, I believe. This is one of the best podcasts I have ever seen. Collapse Life covers many of the same themes and topics that I do: global technocracy, food and food systems, health and wellness paradigms, and recently she had on Jennifer Bielek, who one could call an expert in transhumanism, a subject near and dear to my podcast. Zahra has a very interesting background, ranging from working at the United Nations, which we will ask her about, and working with the FLCCC as Senior Director of Communications. The FLCCC is a medical organization started by a host of brilliant doctors, including Pierre Corey and Paul Merrick. And we will learn more about this also, perhaps. She has worked in the field of international development. Zahra is also a journalist, which is why I think her podcast is so hard-hitting with these major topics. Her questions to her guests are very thoughtful and concise. The topics covered are always well-researched. Zahra is a professional, unlike my podcast where it's amateur hour, but no, I'm joking. I have fun. Zahra and I will be discussing why she left New York City pre-pandemic to live in a rural life right here in Nova Scotia, where she and her husband became essentially homesteaders, just like me. I'm excited to learn these details. Maybe she even lived near me. I asked her not to tell me any of the Nova Scotia details until today for a nice local sort of chat. And the kicker here is she fled this province once the medical jackboots came out and COVID mania took hold of this once great country. And she moved to Texas, right on the border with Mexico. She has some very interesting experiences down there. Maybe she will share. She is in the process of moving again, I think, and we'll get into these details as well, perhaps. So, okay, Zahra, we have an ambitious agenda, I think, ahead of us here. So let's get to it. But first, hello, and welcome to the Freedom Conversation podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to get to know you better and to talk about all sorts of things, hopefully not just about me.
Well, you're an interesting character yourself, and we will get to your podcast, but I have a lot of notes. Don't worry.
Great.
So it's my pleasure to have you here, and I really mean that. So regarding, I think, your background is always a good place to start. Shall we start with journalism? You were journalism prior to working at the UN and the FLCCC. So let's start there, please.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I went to journalism school almost 30 years ago now. And I guess thinking back, I mean, I was always someone who liked writing and telling stories, and I liked things like theater production when I was in high school. And um, when I went to journalism school, my idea was I want to make documentary films. Now, this was before you could make a documentary film on your cell phone. Basically, you needed um, high-end equipment and big budgets and things like that. But I liked the format, and that's what I wanted to do. And so when I went to graduate school, I only applied to two programs. There was a documentary filmmaking program at Stanford University that only let in about a dozen students a year, and I was not one of them.
Hmm.
And I applied to Columbia Journalism School because I lived in New York City and it was local and I wouldn't have had to move somewhere. So I applied, and amazingly, I got in. Um, and I went thinking, okay, I'm going to learn everything I need to learn to be able to get a job making documentary films. Um, but when I got there, and I focused on broadcast journalism. I made a short documentary with two partners as our master's thesis. But the program there was all about reporting, writing, and editing. So they said, if you want to do radio, if you want to do television, you want to do films, you can do whatever you want um, on top of that. But what you really need to learn is reporting, writing, and editing. And so they drilled that into us, and that became um, my stock in trade. Really, that was how I then ended up getting work afterwards, and it's now become my passion and my love. It's what I really enjoy doing. Um, but it's all really the same thing. It's the medium changes, but it's all about asking people questions, getting them to open up and tell their stories, and just getting to some kind of kernel of truth. Well, at least that's what journalism was when I studied it and decided to pursue it. I don't think it's the same um, anymore. I think there's still a lot of good journalists who have that at the heart, but there's a lot more now
Mhm.
that is called journalism that actually does more harm than good. Um, my just to kind of pull the thread of the United Nations, my family, my father worked at the United Nations, and my family traveled around to a bunch of different countries, and so I saw that work firsthand growing up, and so I had an interest in that as well. And so my career was a little bit of working in journalism and working in international development in the communications function. Um, and it was funny when my father heard that I wanted to do that kind of international development work. He was like, "Really? Are you sure?" He didn't want to, I think he didn't want to discourage me. So he didn't go into too much detail, but he did sort of say, it's not maybe exactly what you think it is. And I came to learn that was definitely true. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting. So, working at the United Nations, obviously these days in our um, community or the freedom movement, whatever. I mean, the United Nations is a little bit of something that people are looking at very closely right now and thinking, "Uh-oh, is this a globalist technocratic situation?" Or so, working in this building with these people, what was that like?
It's a great question.
It might be a big one, but what can you tell us?
So, when I started working there, I was young and somewhat naive, I think. But you quickly realize that within the organization, there are a lot of little mini empires. So there are people who create their own little teams, I guess, so to speak. And it's not necessarily people who work directly for them, although sometimes it is, but they pull strings in certain ways and they place people um, across the organization in positions where they'll be able to do what they want to do to make their agenda manifest. And that's very hard to see unless you're really looking for it, and or unless you're kind of the target of not being part of the right team, or pulled into the right clique. When you see other people um taking paths that don't seem to be based on any kind of merit, then you start to go, I wonder what happened there. And then you realize who they're connected to and who they know. and the pieces start to kind of come together. But I can't say that it was really obvious while I was there. And I think what started to happen was some of the narratives. So I worked in communication, and my writing training was really what I was doing. I was writing a
Mhm.
lot of advocacy type stuff, and some of the stuff that I was being asked to expand on or to edit made me wonder, what is really being said here? You know, what's the subtext here? Because they were very good at saying things without saying them, using lots of words to say very little. So as an editor, I always wanted to take things out, but I also was just reading these things and going, this doesn't really make sense, or this doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like
Mhm.
this is what the United Nations should be standing
Yeah,
for.
yeah. What I'm hearing here is you're getting creepy vibes from these people.
There were some people, for sure,
Okay.
individual people
The
who
system, creepy, creepy.
definitely set off the spidey senses.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I think what kept me going through the years of my working there is that there were some people who were just wonderful people,
yeah. I can
highly
imagine that too. Of
intelligent,
course, of
highly
course.
compassionate. And so
Yeah,
when you met people like that, you thought, okay, well, they're in this system. So that gives me hope. That makes me think that I might be able to navigate this and still be able to do good, because the United Nations really does do some things that are valuable.
sure.
Um, or they
Yeah.
did. I don't know.
I'm sure they probably did more good than they do now. It's almost like these organizations like the WEF, the UN, all these other huge global entities. Anybody working in there these days must be hearing what's going on social media or podcasts like ours, where people are saying there's a lot of darn creeps working in these places. Like the CIA, for example, like your first day at work out of Harvard University, you're in there writing something or other, whatever, working in the office at the CIA. You must know when you walk in that building that there's a lot of evil here.
Yeah.
If I could just be so blunt. But anyway, no, that's interesting. How many years did you work at the UN?
I was in and out, so probably in aggregate close to 10 years, I would say.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
But not in one long stretch. And I was mostly a consultant. Of those 10 years, probably spent about 8 years working as a consultant. So you kind of see the system differently as well, as a consultant versus an
Yeah.
employee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You're not exactly an appendage, more of a satellite or something.
in some
Or
ways, as a consultant, the relationship is much more direct. They're paying you to do a deliverable,
yeah.
and they just want to get it done. And so it was kind of nice. You didn't really have all the politics, and you didn't have to sit in as many meetings and things like that. Although one of the things when I worked in New York in the UN headquarters, one of the things that was a constant complaint and point of tension was they would use they would use the rules to be able to hire somebody as a consultant, um, just shy of what employee law would allow, what labor laws would allow. So you could be a consultant for 11 months out of any 12-month period, and
Hmm.
then you had to take a month off, because if you worked more than that 11 months, then they were obligated to pay you benefits and to treat you like an employee and things like that. So,
Jeez.
here's the United Nations, this massive organization committed to human rights,
Yeah.
and it's not actually even following
They're penny pinching,
you know,
trying to save money, trying to not give. It sounds like penny pinching almost in a way. Or
yeah, and I don't even know if that was the motivation. I don't know what it was. I mean, because
mm,
I suppose it must
yeah.
have been
I'm
financial
I'm
at the
thinking
end of
about
the
the health
day.
system. I'm thinking about the health system here in Nova Scotia, which is just atrocious. And my wife's back anyway. I'm not going to sidetrack into any of that stuff. How did you get into working with the FLCC? And maybe that's actually, I'm thinking now, is a jump, because you ended up in Nova Scotia, hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get involved in these things. Where do we
Okay.
go from the UN? Take us closer to the pandemic.
So I left New York. I was working in UNICEF headquarters in New York, and I left there to take a job with an international NGO called Plan International. Um, and they were based in the UK. So I took a full-time job there. I was the editor of the State of the World's Girls Report, and moved to the UK with my husband. Um, and it was a very interesting opportunity. We stayed there. We thought we might stay there for a while, actually.
Which country? Which area of the
Which
UK?
so the headquarters was in a place called Woking in Surrey, just outside of London. And because we had been living in Manhattan, right in the center of New York City, we decided we don't need to live in London, especially if we have to commute out of the city to get to work. We decided we wanted to live somewhere a little bit more rural. So we ended up in a tiny little village in Surrey, which was quintessentially British. It had a cricket pitch and a village green and 4 pubs, and you could go for a walk along the canal with those lovely long canal boats. And it was really nice. It was very nice. We lived in an apartment that was the upstairs of a converted church. I mean, it couldn't be more
I like the
you
sounds of
know
this.
yeah, it was interesting. It was very
Sure.
interesting.
Okay, interesting.
It was interesting to be North American in England. Um,
American
that
or North American? Because as you may know, like people say, and I don't know this, but Canadians are loved abroad. My wife is Swiss, and this is what she tells me. And Americans are abroad. I mean, I don't know. I'm not casting that
Yeah,
net.
I don't know. I don't know whether that's true. I don't know. I am both. I'm a dual citizen, Canadian and American, and so I think that's why I use the phrase
Well,
North
let me add
American.
to that thought now,
Mhm.
because Canada now is very different in the global eye because of the next level tyranny that is still ongoing here, and everybody knows about the Freedom Convoy and what happened
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the world record vaccine mandates, etc. So Canada does not have that particular light anymore. But anyway, please continue
It's
with
no,
your.
it's true. The global reputation of Canada has shifted
It's ruined.
massively
It's
in the past
ruined.
couple of years,
Yeah,
depending on who you talk to, because
yeah.
there are some people who still would desperately want to move to Canada. Anyway, long story short, I'm meandering. We moved out of New York to the UK, and then when it was time to move back, we decided we didn't want to go back to New York, and we decided to move to Canada. By then, we had bought a property in Nova Scotia and renovated it. It's a long meandering story, David. Anyway, we had
Hey,
bought this
we have
property,
time. We have time.
renovated the house, moved back to New York, and then moved to the UK. And then we decided, all right, we're going to go back to the house in Canada, which has been renovated. And we never got a chance to live in it. So
Oh.
that's how we ended up back in Nova Scotia working remotely. I left the job with Plan International, took a job with a think tank in Canada, and they allowed me to work remotely. This was pre-pandemic when remote working was not common,
Hmm.
and not really favored. In fact, people still thought that if you weren't in the office, you weren't really working that hard.
Hmm.
And I actually managed a team across Canada from Vancouver to Winnipeg to Ottawa, and a team in Geneva, from my home in Nova Scotia.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
Wow.
and did that actually through the first year of the pandemic as well. Um,
Okay. Interesting. So now
FLCCC came afterward. So while working at this think tank, and then the job that I had subsequently, more and more the feeling that I'm working on topics or narratives that I no longer agree with just started coming stronger and stronger. I think, my COVID really blew the window wide open. My spidey sense tingling became very front and center. This is wrong. Some of the things that are happening here are wrong, and I don't want to be a part of them anymore.
Mhm.
And the FLCCC was an organization that we came across early on in the pandemic, and they were basically saying, do not fear. There's no reason to think that if you get COVID that you will die. There are options. If you do get hospitalized, this is a hospital protocol that you can ask the hospital team to follow that won't necessarily land you on a ventilator or even better yet, don't get to the hospital. Here's a at-home protocol that you can use. So if you get sick, you can do these things and you can avoid getting to the stage where you might need to get hospitalized. And um, having that information and then having the suggested remedies in hand, we were able to get them. Totally changed things for us, because then it was like having a little insurance policy. Okay, so we don't have to panic, we don't have to worry, we don't have to think that this is going to be the end of everything, because just like everyone, we were hearing what we were hearing, and there was cause for anxiety. There was so little information that, there was a reason to worry. um, and the FLCCC really helped with that, and so we were very grateful to the organization and made a small donation. Through that, got on their mailing list and heard from a newsletter that they were actually looking for a director of communications. um, this
Perfect.
was Yeah, this was probably the fall of 2021, if I'm remembering my timeline correctly. It's all a blur now. Um, and I remember it was about 8 o'clock at night, Nova Scotia time, when we received that email. And actually, it came into my husband's inbox, and he read it and he passed it over to me and he said, "You should apply for this." And I wasn't actually looking for a job at the time, but I thought, well, yeah, that looks good, I should apply for this. And a couple of hours later, actually, the executive director responded and said, "We should talk." And so that's how that
Mhm.
happened. And
Mhm.
it was amazing. It was very, I was very grateful to have an opportunity to do that and to
Mhm.
contribute something positively during the pandemic. Helping other people have the same experience that we had, which is giving them practical information so that they didn't have to panic, they didn't have to fear, that they could help themselves and help their families.
Mhm. Okay. Now, we've gotten a lot of your background, and we're on the ground running here. Now, your podcast, I guess we're leading to the podcast. Hey, you're not working for the FLCCC anymore. You're not working for the United Nations. You're not in this Marxist country, for God's sake. But you are now a free entity. So you started your Substack, which I haven't mentioned, I don't think, in my intro, which is amazing.
Oh,
And your
that's so kind.
podcast, man, your podcast is officially my favorite.
That's
And
very
and
kind of
sorry
you.
to the No Agenda. That was my favorite podcast for a long time. But I'm meandering now. Okay. Can we talk about Nova Scotia briefly?
Yes, please.
Where
Let's
did where did you live?
Well, so it's funny you should ask, and I've been dying to tell you,
Okay,
because
great, great.
we were practically neighbors. I lived
No.
in Riverport.
Oh my goodness. I have a
Yeah.
friend over there. Yeah, I'm in Lunenburg County, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Riverport.
Yeah.
I wonder if you
Yeah.
lived in the same house my friend moved into around the same time you left. A
Okay.
big
Well,
house with 3 stories or not? That could be just the
it's
one question.
2 stories. It's a big house.
Hmm.
Well,
We'll talk
let's
about this maybe
get to it.
later.
Let's get to it. Well,
Okay, sure, sure.
so
Maybe it is. Was there a big
does your
swamp in front?
friend it has Riverport is on a harbor, so
Yes.
it was right in front. Yeah, the water was right in front.
Mhm.
Does your friend's house have a vineyard?
No.
Ah, that's
Okay,
not the
so
same
there we
house.
go. It's not the house. Okay. Well, that
There
would be
is
good.
only
That would be
one
awesome.
vineyard in, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anyway.
River,
Well, that would have been a funny synchronicity, wouldn't it?
yeah, well, Riverport, it's funny, when I worked at FLCCC, I was living in Canada when I took that job, and the whole team there, the whole team, which was probably about 6 people, always joked that, oh, so and so's in Canada. Zahra, do you know that? Because people who don't live in Canada think that we all know each other. And
Yeah.
funnily enough, more often than you would care to imagine, we actually do know each other, or know someone who knows somebody. So
Yeah.
it's not all that
Yeah.
uncommon,
Well,
especially in Nova
yeah,
Scotia.
yeah. Well, for a country with such a huge geographic location, having what 35 or 40 million, it's not a huge population. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That is
But it
interesting.
is funny. I mean, so how, you and I lived not that far from each other for many years, and but it took the internet and Jennifer Bilek, if
That's
we can give her
right.
credit, it took
Yeah.
that to actually find each other. And in a way, it's an amazing and a wonderful thing, and I'm very happy that we're having this conversation now. But it's also sort of sad that we couldn't have found each other in real life in the same
Yeah.
place where we lived. But
At the
it's just a
farmer's market
constant.
or something, maybe, because
Yeah.
you guys were getting into growing your own food and stuff, were you, while you were here?
So, I mean, that was the goal. So we built our place in Nova Scotia. So the house that we took over in Nova Scotia was probably one of the original homes in the village of Riverport, which was founded in 1754. I
Cool.
think my husband will be upset with me that I don't remember, but and it was a diamond in the rough, I think is the nicest way of putting it. It was in rough shape when we got it, but beautiful piece of land on a sloping hillside. And the goal was my husband has always wanted to grow grapes and make his own wine.
Hmm.
And so the piece of property that we purchased had a lot of the criteria that we were looking for. It was definitely hard scrabble because it's a fishing village. It's not a farming community.
Mhm.
And it's hard to grow things there. There's not a lot of topsoil, but for grapes, actually, that's a good thing. Anyway, I'm not the viticulture expert, but
Sure.
we wanted to when we bought our property in Nova Scotia, we were living in New York City in a studio apartment. And we had just lived through the 2008 great financial crisis. And we felt very, very vulnerable living in New York and not being able to um, have any kind of fallback plan, no self-sufficiency. You know, you live in a we lived on the sixth floor of a pre-war building, and we could walk up the stairs if there was ever, you know, a
Mhm.
power outage. But people who live in these big towers, let's say you live on the 21st floor, you know, it's going to be very difficult to walk up and down with your groceries. We just those things were kind of rattling in our mind. So when we
Yeah.
bought our property in Nova Scotia, the idea was to be able to have some self-sufficiency. And we were
Hmm.
never to the point where we were fully self-sufficient, but we were working towards it.
Sure.
And we also knew that we could go back and forth to New York, so we could get our city fix and our country fix. And
Mhm.
you know, we really felt like we had the ability, and we did. We took advantage of that. We went back and forth as much as we could, as much as we wanted to. Um, until COVID. And then that made it very difficult. And the Canadian government made it very clear that if they wanted to, they could tell you you couldn't go to the United States. We were dual citizens, so we were able to cross the border, but all it took was one change of a law or one emergency measures act, and you know, they could tell you anything they wanted. You couldn't leave Nova Scotia at one point and cross into New Brunswick without stopping at a checkpoint and showing your papers. Um, you live there now. You lived through this,
Yeah,
so
I
you
wasn't
know.
allowed out of Lunenburg County. All of the
Is that
counties
right?
were also shut down
Is that
for a
right?
while. Yes, that is right. And when I disobeyed all of these orders, I would throw a bale of hay in the back of my truck. And I said, if anybody pulls me over, I'm on agricultural business.
There you
Because there
go.
was a stipulation that if you're on agricultural business or, you know, a delivery driver,
Mhm.
whatever, if you're working, then you're allowed to be driving around. And I was like, I'm throwing a bale of hay in the back, and these people can F off, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. But there was no checkpoint. I was even worried, man. As you say, people were terrified of the
Yeah.
government, not the virus, not me. I was terrified of the government. So I had to go to the Annapolis Valley, another county. I was crossing county lines, and I was like, are they going to be there?
Mm.
Is there going to be a checkpoint from county to county? There wasn't.
Right.
There wasn't.
Right.
But gee whiz, I wasn't
Just
allowed to. Yeah,
the idea of it, the principle of it
yeah,
is in and of itself terrifying.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's the story of why we left Nova Scotia, but
Mhm.
we did it. It was a very difficult decision because we had decided that that was where we were going to be. We were going to stay there forever, and we loved it there. I mean,
It's beautiful here. It's beautiful here.
loved our property, loved our little farm. We had guinea fowl, we had chickens, we were growing our own food, we were going to make our own wine, we were going to barter wine for whatever other people had. I mean, we were definitely ready to stay there. And but then, you know, when the moment came to leave, we just felt it. We both felt it strongly. No one dug in their heels and said, I'm not going. We just had this very strong feeling that we have to go. And so we did.
Let's talk about the podcast. Collapse Life. A wonderful title. What would you like to say about that? Why choose such a what can we say about this topic? What comes to my mind? It's striking. It feels threatening, but at the same time, hopeful. What would you say about the title of your podcast? What do you think?
Um, well, it was meant to be a little funny,
Hmm.
tongue in cheek, you know. It's sort of like Country Life magazine or Cottage Life magazine. It's Collapse Life. It's the
Mhm.
glossy magazine for the lifestyle that's ending. The lifestyle magazine for a dying lifestyle. The
Mhm.
you know it was meant to be a little tongue in cheek. I think the humor was potentially lost on a lot of people because several people have said that sounds like a very gloomy title. I don't want to read your blog. But I like it, and I think it's meant to be striking. It's meant to be arresting. It's meant to make you go, what is this?
Mhm.
And I always tell people that whether you like it or not, we are living through some form of collapse. And it's not like you see in the movies. It's not waking up to, decimated buildings everywhere and nothing left. You're the last man on earth. It collapse is very often just a very slow erosion, things being chipped away almost imperceptibly. The changes happen sometimes so slowly that you don't even know they're really happening until the thing that you once remember is no longer there. And then you go, what happened to that? Um,
Mhm.
Collapse can be very, very slow. And it's just to say that, civilizations have come and gone for millennia. It's a natural process. It doesn't mean that human civilization or that mankind ceases to exist. It just means that there's an end of a particular way of living and the beginning of a new way of living, and that is undeniably what we're living through right now. And so collapse life is just meant to be a bit of a guide to that process. And it's not that we have all the answers, but we are asking questions and we're looking at certain individuals to help us with their own expertise, kind of share their perspective and guide us through some of those. And while we were doing that, kind of my husband and I on our own, we thought, well, we could turn this into something that could maybe benefit more people. We can make it wider. We can use the skills that we have because we were both trained as writers and editors. Um, and just see what happens with it. And it was and is a labor of love. I would love for it to be sustaining so that we could grow, that we could hire people and do more and reach more. But that's not the main reason we're doing it. I don't, it's not a mercenary goal. It's not like I want some big media conglomerate to come along and buy me out or anything like that. I
Mhm.
like doing it. I like talking to the people that we talk to. I like that it's a blog format so that it leaves it quite loose rather than the way I was trained as a journalist. An article had to be reported out. It wasn't about me and my thoughts. It was about finding other people who can give you the side of the story or their own expertise. So um
Mhm.
this is slightly different, and it's kind of fun to be able to explore these ideas and be a little snarky sometimes, and um get some guest posts. We've had some wonderful writers very generously share their thoughts with us. Like last week, a guy from Brazil who did a great story comparing Kamala Harris to Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, on the YouTube, it says, why don't I share a screen just real quick? And if anybody wants to find you, this will be an easy way to do it. I'll just share it. Here we do. I'm going to show you our YouTube channel in a 1 second. Share, click. It's amateur hour, people. Okay, here we go. There it is. A thinking person's guide to civilization in demise. Collapse Life on YouTube. Here it is. Go find it. Go listen. All this great stuff. Food paradigms. Sustain. Look, Joe Salatin. Matthias Desmet you had on there, and wow, what a guest. I've asked him twice, and I'm a small fish in a big pond. And I do my best to sound professional and not say silly things. Okay, here we go. This is your
This is the
Substack.
Substack.
And this
Yeah.
is, I've been wondering what happened to this fellow, Dylan Mulvaney. I haven't seen him around in a while. So maybe people want to check that out. So I'll end the share screen.
Thanks for that, David.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so we were talking about this just before we went on air about how it's very hard on these platforms because the kinds of things that we are interested in talking about, they're, we don't hew to any particular ideology necessarily, but it's certainly not mainstream. The things that we talk about, the people that we have on, um, all have pretty contrary or non-mainstream views. And so it's hard to surface on these platforms. It's hard to fight the algorithms. And then, I mean, almost guaranteed we are being shadow banned. We
Yeah.
have one strike against us because one of our early interviews was with Dr. Meryl Nass. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
her.
I know, I'm aware of her. Yeah.
Um, she's wonderful, and we
Yeah.
had a great conversation with her where she talked about germ warfare and how the whole sort of vaccine industry and her experience with the anthrax vaccine. And I was still naive enough to think, oh, this will be fine. We'll put this on YouTube, and no, it was not fine
So would that
because
interview not be on YouTube at all? You're not allowed to show it, not allowed to air it, or?
it got taken down. The reason was Dr. Meryl Nass was just talking about her own experience. And early on in the pandemic, she treated patients with the drugs that are not to be named, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. Um, and yeah, that goes against YouTube's medical information policy. And now that I've just said that, I probably won't be able to put this on our YouTube channel. So find us on Rumble.
Well, you
Maybe you can
mentioned
share a
of
screen and
yeah,
show our Rumble channel.
yeah. Well, yeah, we can't say the V word. Gee whiz. Vaccine. Um, this is interesting. Maybe just one detail about the background there. Are you in Texas right now?
Yes.
You moved, you
Yes.
left Nova Scotia, went to Texas, right down to the border with Mexico. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh
That is
my,
right. Yeah.
wow. You went from one, you jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire, did you?
Yeah. We don't tend to do things by half measure. Um, well, so when we left Nova Scotia, with heavy hearts, we decided to leave. We decided we wanted to be in the United States. We didn't have to be in a major metropolitan center anymore because my job was remote. Um, and we wanted to be somewhere where freedom was still valued. So we weren't going to stay in the Northeast because talk about civilization and demise. I mean, drive through parts of Pennsylvania, for example.
Really?
Um, yeah, those were once mighty towns built on, mining and industry and agriculture. And now the only jobs are at massive Amazon warehouses. Um, and you can just really see the decline. And we drove down from Nova Scotia down to Texas when we were house hunting. We drove through all of those areas, and you could palpably feel how the best days of those places were behind them. And there was we went to Florida first. We actually looked at Florida. Um, Florida's very busy. We wanted to be somewhere a little quieter, and then we hit Texas and we just loved it. We loved the people that we met. We were RVing for a little while, and so we would meet people in state parks or RV parks, and we met just wonderful people. And Texas is so big, it's so
Mhm.
different. You
Mhm.
have mountains, you have desert, you have the sea, you have farm country
Is
and
there
horse
forests there?
country.
And forgive my country bumpkin, never left Nova Scotia type attitude, but well, I mean, I have, but I really am a redneck. Okay. Is there forests in Texas too? Forests in Texas?
There is some, but it's not like what we know up in the
Okay. Okay.
Northeast.
Pretty desert atmosphere.
So the Southwest is very dry and desert. The northeast of Texas, up towards Louisiana, um, is more lush. It's much more humid as well,
Mhm.
and very often when the big storms come through out of the Gulf, that area gets hit. Um, but it is much more green. Um, it's very different than Nova Scotia. It's
Yeah, I
very
bet.
different.
Yeah. As
Uh,
you were interviewed by a friend of yours there, the economic fellow, what's his name?
Peter Grandich.
Peter Grant. He said a funny thing that made me laugh because you were telling the story to him, and he said there's not much the same about Nova Scotia and Texas, other than maybe the water itself. Yeah, anyway, I thought that's funny. Yeah, probably
Yeah.
true. Probably true.
Well, one of the things that we learned is if you are going to make a major move, it's actually good to not have too many reminders of the place that you
Hmm.
left, because then you might start to fall into that nostalgia, or the human nature of kind of regretful thinking. Did we make the right choice? But if you're in a place that's so different, um, you don't try and make those parallels. You don't go,
No.
well, this is similar, but not quite like the place that I left. So it is drastically different here. We chose to live in the Rio Grande Valley, right on the border with Mexico, um, and we did end up in a town, small city, and it's still too busy for us. I think one thing that we've found about ourselves is we just want to be remote. And Nova Scotia was remote, and it has its downsides for sure. If you forget something, when you run into town, going back into town is going to be a half-day event. So, there's certainly the conveniences of being in a small city, but there's also lots of upsides of being in a more remote area, and we kind of miss that.
Yeah. Sometimes I think about leaving Canada to this very day. Um, and my last upsurge of interest revolved around Louisiana. Speaking
Mm,
of drastic shifts and
yeah.
completely new paradigms, I mean, swamps and alligators, are you kidding? However, the government there is doing very interesting things. Maybe you're aware of this. They've outlawed anything coming from up on high from the WHO,
Mhm,
the WEF, vaccine mandates, mask mandates. Not
mhm.
happening in Louisiana, ladies and gentlemen. Not happening. It's coded in law now, isn't it? Have you heard
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
I know that they passed it through their legislature, and I think the last I was aware, the governor needed to sign it, but they were expecting that he would. So, yeah.
I think it's happened, but anyway, listeners could fact check that and
Hmm.
check with the property down there. And Japan is the other one. Speaking,
Really?
um, yeah, we don't need to necessarily talk about that. My reasons why I think that would be interesting and possible. But yeah, anyway, moving. We're
Well,
all trying to
so,
find a place, aren't we, in this world?
but you left a comment on one of our videos where you described the setup that you have in Nova
Yeah,
Scotia, and
yeah,
I have to say I'm envious, because it sounds
yeah,
ideal. Like you have a farm, you have a
yeah.
homestead, you
Homestead.
forage, you grow your own food.
Yeah, foraging. We forage mushrooms, berries. I can get cranberries across the street, wild mushrooms across the street. There's a swamp here for the cranberry.
Oh, wow.
Blackberries around the lakes, and I got a freezer full of all that stuff just from this year. It's a good year for that. But anyway, yeah, no, we grow a lot of food. I have two agricultural degrees, which I took through the pandemic online.
Oh, wow.
So we're dug in, you could say. We've been
I think
prepping, and
that's
not in
great.
a crazy prepper way, just my grandmothers and forefathers are Newfoundlanders, and
Mhm.
they still do this because it's just what they do.
I talk about people who know how to get through hard times, people from
Mm.
Newfoundland. Our
Oh,
immediate neighbors in Riverport were all Newfoundlanders. There were a lot of Newfoundlanders who came to Riverport because it was a fishing village, and
mhm.
wonderful, amazing people. And they lived through so much. They were from one of those outport villages that got moved. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
for they're now, well, she's in her 90s now, and he's passed sadly, but they for their whole life up until they moved to Nova Scotia, their village was not connected by road.
Yeah.
You had to get there by either seaplane or boat.
Yep.
And I find that
Yep.
so amazing that you can actually meet people who are alive today who lived that way.
Yeah.
Um,
And the interesting thing is that they floated the houses across the bay and just put them there. Anyway, any listener might want to just look up Newfoundland history. All the way back to the settling of the province. Wow.
yeah.
These people had a rough time. There's no
Yeah.
soil there, pretty much at all. And I lived there for 10 years myself, right in the city, St. John's
Oh,
capital.
wow.
Yeah.
I
I
love
could tell
that
you
city.
stories. Newfoundland rocked my world. Oh, I was like, this is amazing,
Yeah.
beautiful. The people are really our salt of the earth, and the
Absolutely.
landscapes are breathtaking. Yeah.
Mhm. It is. It was actually where we wanted to move. We moved to Nova Scotia because we still had our foothold in New York. In fact, we still lived in New York when we bought our property in Nova Scotia. And between Nova Scotia and New York, you can drive.
Yeah.
You know, to do it from Newfoundland, you can only do that at certain times a year. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not really possible
Mhm.
other times. So we settled in a way on Nova Scotia because it was a little bit more livable. But Newfoundland, I think our lives might have been totally different if we had actually bought a property in Newfoundland. Maybe we'd still be there. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe that's a good place regarding self-sufficiency because they have a moose overpopulation of moose. People are getting killed at crashes on the highways quite frequently. There's an overpopulation of moose, and the point is that one moose will feed a whole community. It's a
Yeah.
massive animal, and it's delicious. So, any people who are concerned about meat and self-sufficiency, move to Newfoundland. You will not have problems. There's a lot of meat. There really is, and they're animals you could walk up to and shoot. They're not. They're very docile, but and I hate to say that, but and
Um,
as a spiritual person, I've given up hunting.
oh, really?
Mhm.
So I know this is your conversation and I don't want to derail it, but I did want to ask you one thing because you were describing your homestead and your foraging and being able to kind of put up food. But one thing for us that's really important as part of your kind of preparedness plan is communities, having other people around who are on the same wavelength or who have a diverse set of skills. So you know how to do this thing and they know how to do that thing, and that together you've kind of tacitly agreed that you'll help each other out. And that's just kind of, in a place like Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, that was just, you didn't have to say it out loud, right?
Oh
That's
yeah.
just what people did. That was built in, it was coded into the DNA. Now we have to actually create that. We have to find other people and overtly say, if I do this for you, will you do that for me? So how are you and your wife kind of figuring that part of it out?
Well, where I live is a very rural place, and I live on a lake, and there's 5 houses around the lake, and we know everybody. We just had the whole road re-graveled, so we got together, pooled money. I would say that we got Covidians. We have people like you and I who would agree with everything we're discussing. We have Malthusian climate change obsessed people. But I mean, with all of these different headspaces, I have worked with these people and we've talked. They see me as a little bit of the classic prepper from a TV show, the paranoid guy who maybe has a "Make America Great Again" hat hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
There's this weird connection with Donald Trump out here. If you say the wrong thing, oh, you must. Anyway, I won't talk about him. But anyway, I guess what shall I say? With the community, we're okay where we are. That's the first thing. And when I drive down my rural road, I see small farms, 1 or 2 cows on a misty morning. I drive by a lake filled with fish and wild edible food. I drive by another little farm. I mean, and these are old, salt of the earth, maritime Canadians, round, strong old guys, and they're out there pounding posts. They're fixing their fences. They know how to fix a tractor.
Yeah.
They know how to pull an engine out of a vehicle and put it back in again. I don't, but they do. They got guns. I don't. I don't. We have no guns here and never will. That's so my wife's rule, and I abide by it. But I have neighbors who have them and also gold. So there is conversations around me about the collapse,
Mm.
even with people in my neighborhood who disagree with me about COVID, about vaccines, about all that stuff. We
Mm.
do agree that there's a feeling in the air. And I said, don't worry, I got food. And my neighbor said to me one time, I have guns and gold. And I said, okay, that's good. So if I mean,
Interesting.
you talk to your neighbors, you find things out, but you got to be friendly.
Yeah.
No fighting, no arguing. And we did have arguments when the Ukraine thing started. There's all this talk, and I was like, oh, come on, you know.
Mm.
So I had to learn how through the COVID, right? You had to learn how to temper your intensity
Yeah.
about what I would call, well, the New World Order, to just be very blunt. I see
Yeah.
darkness in our world, but many people don't. So I'm walking this, I'm getting better at it actually, working with people who don't think how I do and finding the middle ground that we're all human beings. We would
Mhm.
like to be healthy, happy, and safe and secure. And everybody can work together on this level,
Yeah.
I think. Those are some
It,
thoughts. Some thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, I'm happy to hear it. And I see a lot of what you're saying in our experience there, but in the earlier days. There were all old timers living in Riverport when we moved there. And in fact, everybody looked at us a little kind of going, "You're a young couple. Why are you moving here when my kids who are your age are moving away? They're not
Yeah.
moving here." They were all old timers who had been in that place for a very long time and had done things a certain way for a very long time. But that has all been changing really rapidly. And maybe it's just that it's Riverport and where you are, it's just a little bit different. Um, but one of the things that worried us during COVID was, you'd like to think that your neighbors are people that you can rely on, and that, when you need help, that they'll be there for you because they know that you'll do the same for them. And that's how community, you don't have to agree on everything. You don't even have to like each other. But, when you live in a remote place, you know that you need to help out your neighbor because someday you may need them to help you out, and at least don't piss them off.
Yeah.
Um, but then suddenly with COVID, we found things, and not exactly our next door neighbors, but within the surrounding community, for example, in Nova Scotia, they closed the beaches
Yeah.
because it's COVID, and so you can't go to the beach. Nova Scotia is beach; there's beach everywhere.
The
Uh,
license plate here says Canada's Ocean Playground.
yeah, but you weren't allowed to go to the beach.
No.
And people were reporting each other.
Yeah.
If you took your dog down to the beach where there was nobody else, I mean, even on a good day in the middle of tourist season in Nova Scotia, the beaches are not crowded. There are so many beaches and so few people. You can shoot a cannon down these beaches and not hit anything. There was nobody else anywhere to be seen. This wasn't us. I just had heard about it in the community. Someone took their dog for a walk down the beach and they got reported to the authorities because you weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
Canadians love rules. Rules are there for a reason. And if you
Yeah.
break the rules, someone's
Yeah.
going to tell on you. And
Yeah. The
that was the
downfall.
kind of thing. Okay, going to the beach, whatever. But when things start to escalate and rules start to become more kind of life or death, and your neighbors are going to tell on you, even though it doesn't affect them. That was something that worried us a little bit. I don't know if that's something that you think about. I mean, that could happen anywhere. I'm not saying that Nova Scotia is special in that regard. It was just something that we thought about while we lived there.
People do what they're told in Canada because there is a truism about the world's take on Canada, and that is that we're very polite and very friendly, and that's a fact. But this served to our demise during the authoritarian measures that happened. The banality of evil cropped up very fast here. People were
Mm,
ratting on each other. There's videos of people being dragged out of their turkey dinners because there was 6 people, not 5.
right,
And the neighbors called the police, said there's people
right.
over there having turkey dinner and they're not supposed to, according to the current rule.
Yeah.
So these things have happened. Yeah. And of course, the trucker convoy. That was the very sad.
Yeah. But also so inspiring. I mean, who would have thought that that movement would spring up in Canada of all places,
I
right? The
know. I know.
polite, sensitive Canada. I mean, I was
Yeah.
so proud when that happened.
Me too. And the funny thing is, we're very polite, but don't go too far because if you upset a lot of good, friendly people too much, they will say that's enough. And then it was a populist uprising,
Yeah.
unlooked for, unforeseen, and unimagined. And I was like,
Yeah.
in a week they organized this stuff, and now they're in Ottawa. Uh, dozens of blocks in all directions,
Yeah. And people
miles
traveled from all across the country to
blocked
be
with
there.
trucks. Yeah.
We
Oh,
know
yeah.
people who left Nova Scotia and went out there because they just wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to witness that
Me
moment in
too.
history, and it was amazing.
Yeah, we
What we
followed the convoy from here in Infield, Nova Scotia, near the major airport. That's where
Mhm.
they gathered, the Eastern contingent, you could say, 6 in the morning. So we drove an hour and a half to get there. So we got
Uh-huh.
up at 4:30 in the morning because we wanted to be there to see
Yeah,
this for ourselves.
that's
There
amazing.
was thousands of people there. At 6 a.m. in the dark,
In the middle of
freezing.
winter, don't forget, this was
This was
cold
a
Canadian
very
winter.
cold, and I'm talking like the type of cold that when the snow crunches hard and loud under your feet, that type of cold. Men, women, and children, cross section of society, everybody. I was like,
Yeah.
this is populism right here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they filled the parking lot at this massive truck stop, and off they went, bam, 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 one after the other. And we're like, we're going to Ottawa. We got wrapped up in it, and I was like, we can't go to Ottawa right now. We're just wearing the clothes on our. We got to go home. I'm tired. But we followed the convoy from the airport near Halifax all the way to Truro in the
Nice.
tail, and we saw every overpass just like on TV. It was real. And along the highway, there's rural houses. You see them once in a while. There's people who live near the highway, but it's not near an overpass. And they were all out in their backyard too, hip deep in snow, waving a Canadian flag.
Amazing.
Sometimes one person just going, hey. And I was like, mind blown.
Yeah.
This is what we could do as a society if we had enough, God damn it. But
Yeah.
look what happened. It was a Berlin Wall moment. And I thought,
Mhm.
this is Berlin Wall right here. Something's going to happen. But the Emergencies Act happened.
Mhm.
And that's it. It was
Yeah.
swept away by the jackboots of the New World Order. Or I hate to keep using that term, but I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah. No, I fear that well, it's put a wet blanket on that kind of a movement in probably in our lifetime. I don't know that we'll see that again in Canada
Nope,
um
we won't.
in our lifetime. I hope it will recur. I hold out hope that people will be, I mean, they'll remember the strength that they had during that moment and say we can do this again. But the reaction was so swift and so harsh that I think for the near future it's going to be very hard to organize that same spirit again.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It's an emotional
Sad.
topic for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think the feeling doesn't go away. It's just probably gone a little bit quiet. It's gone a little bit more underground. So,
Yeah.
you know, doing what you're doing and finding people and having those conversations, but just not doing it so overtly, not going to the
No.
Parliament Square, but just
Yeah.
doing it, you
Yeah.
know,
We have a new
more
thing.
quietly.
We have a new thing now. Unified non-compliance. Everybody does their individual part now. And there's a lot of people who woke up because of that mentally. And
Hmm.
they're not going back down this darn road again, for sure. There'll be
Hmm.
a lot more people screaming, I'm not wearing a mask. God damn it. You're going to hear that a lot more next time, I think.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's where we are. The collapse is maybe here. And we'll see, won't we? Let's see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think whether or not the collapse is here, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know. Maybe we'll know, you know, in the light of history. But um, the point is to just to ask the questions, not to just be you know, an empty vessel waiting to be filled, but to ask the questions of yourself and of the people around you, and to just build a life that you want in on your own terms. And whether society is collapsing or not, that's not a bad mission to be following. It's not a bad way to organize your life, right? To be self-sufficient, to take stock of the skills that you
Mm,
have
yeah,
and build the skills that you don't have, or
yeah.
find the people around you who can help supplement that, um, and to just be free. I think whether collapse is happening or not, that, you know, it's a pretty good way to structure your life.
Yeah, I follow this philosophy of be the solution. What else can you do? So I try to be the solution that I think is good.
Yeah.
Just one
As
guy.
as long as it's not harming anyone else,
Yeah.
there's really no downside.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Zara, we've been at this an hour and 12 minutes. Where could we go with the conversation? Or maybe we could consider our wrap up a little final few words together. How you feeling?
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with you. So wherever you want to go,
Oof.
I'm
Well, I
I'm
mean,
with you.
I got through a lot of the things I wanted to ask you, my notes. I'm looking at them and I don't have much else in the way of prepared thoughts.
Well,
Hmm.
I do think we've covered a lot of ground. I think where we could leave it is that we're now connected. We're on the same path. It just so happens that we were literally on the same path in the same place, which
Yeah.
is an amazing thing.
Mm.
But even though we're now separated by a great distance, where we found each other, and I think that's incredible. And I think it's not just the two of us. I think what that is just a sign, a symbol that there are more of us out there, and we just need to find each other
Yeah.
and just keep sharing. Share this podcast with people that you know,
Mhm.
and you know, we're not. I think it's important, we're not crazy. We're not dangerous people. We're
No.
normal people living normal lives who are just questioning things that this is something that's been happening throughout history. And
Yeah.
I don't know everything. I'm always open to learn something and to be shown if I'm wrong. Um,
Me too.
so, I think the more that we can approach people and have those conversations and do it in I'm trying to remember how Dr. Desmet put it, in a gentle way, not in an aggressive way, not trying to show people how wrong they are, but to just continue to just show them that there might be another way that they can look at things. And whether they agree or not, you have your right to say your truth. And that's what he would encourage us all to do, is to just keep speaking, keep having these conversations.
Yeah, that's so important. And maybe that's the spiritual side of all of this too, is we could work on ourselves through this and learn how to be more copacetic or friendly, even though we may feel sometimes frustrated. But temper all that stuff. Be a good person, be a good neighbor. This is my code I live by.
It's very Canadian.
In particular, maritime Canadian. We're a special breed out here.
Yeah.
Salt of the earth.
I mean, I
Well,
think you're absolutely right. I think that, the more we can all work to be kind and compassionate human beings, the better the world will be. But also, I think, you said earlier, like, we are known as Canadians, we are known to be polite. And I think that's a good thing, but it's not always a good thing. I think there are times when you can be pushed too far, and we need to know where our line is and when to push back, and
yeah,
to at the risk of not being polite anymore, to say no.
yeah,
um
yeah,
I think that's a really important lesson.
yeah. That's a good ender. Yeah, that's the tightrope I walk really in Canada now, because you must be careful what you say, and there's a lot of bills and legislation coming
Mhm.
regarding online speech. Bill C-63. Anybody could take a look at that. Things I have said on the internet retroactively could become a crime, and they will force you either A, go back and delete that thing from 7 months ago. Good luck finding it.
Mhm.
Or maybe you'd like to go to prison
Yeah.
or have a large fine. This
Yeah.
is very real. This is happening in Canada as we speak.
Yeah.
So, anyway, shout out to
Yeah.
the world. Help us. Send help. No, no, it's wonderful talking to you. And I thank you for coming on my podcast.
My
And we'll
pleasure.
talk in the future, I think. I have a feeling. I
I would
hope.
love that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to put all the links to your work and Zahra Sethna from Collapse Life podcast and Substack. Have a great day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Collapse Life story. Please check out more of David's work to expose the New World Order and resist transhumanism. He's on Rumble at the Freedom Convo podcast, and you can also check out the audio feed at the freedomconvopodcast.podbean.com. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe to the Collapse Life Substack. We publish news stories there every week. And then continue the conversation over on X, where our following is growing slowly but surely. If you like making a statement, you may also want to look at our Collapse Life store at collapselife.com. We're grateful for all the support and encouragement as we celebrate our 1 year anniversary this month. Our readers and viewers are the fuel that keeps us going. We'll be back next week for another episode, and we hope you'll join us. Until then, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.